Yeah, the suspicion would certainly be, Jessica, that the girls would have had all sorts of things to say about who they were in the world. Yes?
Yeah, I found some huge gender differences in my research, and I know that it's kind of unfashionable to talk about that, like our culture kind of seems to smooth over the differences between men and women sometimes, but like one of the other big differences I found apart from the romantic partner thing was to do with fathers. So I found that, you know, fathers do come quite a way down the list after mums and best friends and other people like that, but for boys they're further up the list than they are for girls. So before, when I was talking about who the most important person in your life is, 10% of boys told me that their dad was, and only 1% of girls said that. So, and I think too, in terms of gender, some, you know, more and more the research is starting to say that to talk about the adolescent-parent relationship is relatively inaccurate, that actually you need to be talking about the father-son relationship, the father-daughter relationship, the mother-son relationship and the mother-daughter relationship, and that they're actually quite distinct.
Charlie, I'm wondering whether you, who are most recently a teenager, noticed that difference in maturity, in focus, in the way that the world was perceived?
Well, if I talk from my environmental activism experience, I find that 95% of those involved are females. I don't like to generalise though. So yeah, no, I guess I'm not sure. Yeah.
But it just does seem, Jessica, from what you're saying, that girls really are those steps ahead of boys, often in terms of complex, nurturing relationships.
I wouldn't want to say that. I actually think that part of it is a problem with how we ask boys and girls about, you know, to tell us about their relationships, and the way that we, you know, prime people with questionnaires and things like that, and that maybe they're attuned to the way that a girl would answer the questionnaire, and that we need to be more creative and think of a different way to get at what's happening. It's not that there's less happening in a boy's head than a girl's head, necessarily.
Well, we're circling around the issue of communication again, and Antoinette, I wanted to bring this to you. One of the things you've looked at is the languages of love and how you express love and read your child with regard to that. And perhaps the boy-girl question is as good a place to start there as any.
The boy-girl question being?
Well, how do you relate emotionally to boys by contrast with how you would relate to girls?
Parents?
Yeah, for parents.
Okay. Well, this is just one way that we can conceptualise relationships, to look at love languages, and there's some work written that those who are on the internet might want to look up. Gary Chapman and the 5 love languages. It's an interesting way to consider how we understand not just ourselves but also the other person we're interacting with, whether it's our spouse or our child. And it gives some ideas about different ways in which we each express love, so that that we tend to have a primary way in which there's a language that we speak to the other person to express our love. But also that when someone is communicating and interacting with us, that if they do certain things, it speaks love to us, and if they do other things, we don't see it as an expression of love. Now, just take a little bit of time to outline the 5 love languages. This is putting myself on the spot, my memory. Physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time.
I think service is one
service,
of them,
acts of service, and
gifts. Yeah.
Not my primary one, so I kind of keep forgetting. That's not to say, if anyone's listening that would like to give the gifts, I shouldn't do that. And so if you kind of think of your own relationships, there are ways in which if you wanted to express love to someone in your family, or a parent expressing love to a child, they would have a way that they primarily first think to do that. So whether it would be giving a gift or spending quality time with them, or doing acts of service, which may be helping them with something, while helping fix a broken bike while their kids at school or something. And then I guess to bring the connection, if the language that the parent is speaking is their primary sense of relating to or communicating through their actions and their words with their child, if that is different to the language that to the child feels like love, then there's a mismatch, and that message isn't getting through. So I often find this in practice, that parents, they do love their children and they want to do the best for them, and the adolescent says, they don't love me. And it's an interesting way to start to kind of unpack that is, what is it that's going on that parent loves them, believes they're doing all of these things, but that message isn't getting through? And often if you ask the young person, they'll say, well, every time he travels for work, he brings me gifts, but yet he never has time to spend with me and come and watch my sporting events. And there you've got a parent who's speaking the love language of gifts and a child who is speaking the love language of quality time. And so that, if you can kind of, obviously you've got all those different combinations to think through, but it's a very interesting way to start to think about how can I relate to you and how can I interact with you in my behaviour and in my words that speaks to that sponge in you that fills up your love tank. And that's just one more jargon I'm going to enter. The fact that we all have a love tank. And when our love tank is full, we're happy in the sense of a sense of well-being and a sense of good mental health. And I think if you start to look at a lot of, going back right to the start when we identified some more pathology around adolescence and depression and difficult behaviour and acting out, often with those kids you can see there's an empty love tank. There's a sense that they really need filling up. And so what do children do and what do adolescents do to get filled up? They look to a whole lot of ways that might not be that functional, which may well lead you into peer relationships and other things that might not make sense to the adults looking on, but to the child who's kind of starving for that need to feel loved. Not whether there are people in that person's life that love them, but do they feel it, and is it coming across in a way that is meaningful to them?
Thanks, Charlie. It actually does prompt an interesting question which I'd wanted to bring up, which was, I think we've touched on the importance of friends and peers, but it's a common thing among parents of adolescents to say, I can't stand that group that they hang around with. I can't bear that boy that's always here, or those girls are just so negative. And if only I could get my child away from them. If only I could break that friendship cycle. Is that something that's worth doing? Or is it...
Depends on how brave you are and how much you like to fall flat on your face with failure. I guess what I'd be asking for is, what are they getting from that friendship group, and is there a way that you can also be providing that? Not to supplant that immediately, but to perhaps lessen that bond and kind of say, well, we all have needs that need to be met, and if they're having those needs met in ways that we're finding inappropriate, whether it's early sexual relationships that we're not approving of, or inappropriate peer influences, or not studying and hanging out on the internet and playing computer games all night so they're too tired to go to school, that there's some need that's being met there. There's something that they're getting from that. They're not just doing it for no reason. So try and figure that out. Try and kind of be a bit of a detective around what is it that they're needing, and are there ways that I can fulfil that? And I don't think that should be to go and get your own internet account
so
and
no
play games with them.
I think there's that next issue of, not being accepted as a friend by your teenager on Facebook, which has been a blow to many a parent. Yes, a question here, actually. I'll give you mine.
We've talked so much about the importance of parents. We've talked about the matter of learning certain things in life. How much do you think that we have actually created the teenagers of the day by being a working group of parents? Parents are never home. Parents have all got a lot of other interests. We're all trying to do our other things. Are we not spending enough time looking to our families?
Do we need to be present to parent? Who wants to?
It helps. I think you only have to look at census data to see how, we look to the generation that's older than us as, our model for how we do things. And for our adolescents, they're more likely to be in a home with one of their biological parents and maybe other people serving the parent role. They're less likely to have as many siblings. They're less likely to have parents that are married, and if they are married, who stay married, increasing workforce participation. So without passing judgment on that, the role models are different. That's a given, I think.